Good morning, everyone. My name is Ioannis Mesionis, and today I would like to talk to you about the operating model we use at EasyJet to take an idea from its inception to production. It's really exciting to be standing here in front of you today, and I have listened to some amazing presentations so far. And I feel before I start explaining how I ended up here and what my talk is going to be all about, I think I need to take a step back and explain a little bit about myself, who I am, and what is it that I do in EasyJet. So I started with a bachelor degree back in 2015 in mathematics, followed by master's in data science in 2017. In 2019, I was lucky enough to join EasyJet as a data scientist, where I have now been working as a lead data scientist since 2021. And what is it that I do on a day-to-day basis is I try to work closely with the business stakeholders, try to understand their pain points, and if possible, translate these pain points into data solutions that make it into production. Probably from the presentation so far, you understand that this is a real challenge, right? And there have been many statistics, but I think most of you are familiar with this one that suggests that 87% of the data science projects don't make it to production. And if you ask me, that's a huge number. That's a huge number indeed. So I hope that today I'm going to explain why this is the main issue. And of course, if you think about companies try to become data-driven, of course, at the beginning, everyone is so excited about their journey, packing up all the latest updates and new tech about data science, the fact that things make an impact with data products that reach their final destination, which is, of course, production. And while there's this excitement about the journey, expecting that this is going to be a smooth ride indeed, reality can be somewhat different and a little bit more complex than people might expect. And what I hope to discuss today is how we use the operating model within EasyJet to address these pitfalls and try to see how we can make a product reach its final destination, which is production. So this is the operating model, always starting with a business idea. We start with a single front door, moving on to the business understanding phase, followed by the inception, research and development, pilot phase to prove the value, and finally, the last stage, which is release, where we take the product and reach production, making impact. And today, together, we will go through on every single one of these phases, try to understand the different activities that are happening alongside with the deliverables of every single phase. Now, starting with a single front door, and if you think about data science and its idea, it's always about solving that specific business problem, right? And this is actually true, at least from my experience. Most of the companies fail to become data-driven because it looks like there's a huge misalignment between the data science teams and the business stakeholders. And this is actually true. Without the business chipping in, it's most likely that you will be solving the wrong problem at the end. And so in the single front door, we always start with the business problem being led by the business in collaboration with different departments and the representatives of these departments, such as the lead data scientist, the data analyst, finance manager, and business chains. Every single one of these people use their expertise trying to get the right answer for the right question. And simple as that, the deliverable of this single front door phase is we get clarity of the problem, at least at a high level, and there's a benefit tag attached to every single project that helps us with the prioritization when there are many projects into the backlog. The second phase is the business understanding phase, where we aim to do a deep dive into the problem statement. The main protagonists of this phase are the business analysts that are doing an excellent job creating the so-called definition of done document that defines two main things. The main thing is what success looks like, and as the name suggests, when do we consider that this project is done? In the document itself, we capture information holistically about the problem statement and what are the actions that we expect to take based on the results of the tool. We also we also list all the different requirements that are going to be, or functionalities that are going to be part of the initial version, which is always the MVP, and also the requirements that are going to be part of the end product. Finally, we capture information about how can we evaluate the solution, how can we test that it's working. And if you take a predictive model, for example, and I give you some predictions against some random numbers, how can you tell me that these specific numbers are working? Is there a way for us to test them? So finally, depending on how complex the solution might be, we require the support of the architecture team. And that will help us in case we need to integrate the solution with a third-party system and overall assess if the solution is feasible. At the end of this phase, we know what success looks like. This is defined now. All the different resources and the teams that need to be involved are allocated accordingly, and we have established that the solution can be tested. Moving on to the inception phase, or the readiness step, as I like to call it, is where we have the data scientists start exploring a little bit about the data to help them understand the data behind the domain, if they're working on a new domain. For instance, if you're working with some PPC data, this is the step that you're going to enhance that business knowledge and understand essentially what the data is all about. Also, it helps you understand and capture any nuances that there are in the data and document these nuances in a Confluence page or whatever software you're using. And this step is important because this is going to influence what's going to be the solution that you're going to use as we're going to see in the research and development. So for instance, you're about to create a linear regression model. This will help you understand whether you need to remove outliers in the process. Finally, given that you get understanding of the data, if you're going to use sensitive data in your specific product, you need to make sure that you're contacting the data protection officer. So you make sure that you're GDPR compliant and you're not using any data that you weren't supposed to. Finally, you have to make sure that the business are on board with the journey. And in this case, you do a playback session where you try to explain what are the requirements that are going to tackle first and essentially give them a sense of the roadmap. The deliverables of this phase is you have data understanding at the solution side, it's crystal clear, and you know how you're going to implement the solution. The next phase, which is personally my favorite because this is considered the more, let's say, hardcore stage for a data scientist, for a tech guy, which I am at heart, is the research and development phase where the data scientists actually jump on and start coding the solution. So far from this presentation, you can understand that the operating model is process-driven, but there is so much uncertainty in data science, so we have to make sure that we are agile in the process of creating the model, whether you need to use Kanban or Scrum, depending on the solution. And in a way, how this looks in practice within EasyJet is by following these 5 different agile rituals, as I like to call them. We start with the sprint planning, and this is about creating all the items that you need to implement to create your solution. And of course, you have to make sure that there's a single goal for every single sprint that you do, and all the items are distributed accordingly within the data science and analytics team. And of course, the moment you have these items ready, you have to make sure that you track the progress in a nice way. And in order for us to do that, we use daily stand-ups if you're using Scrum. And the purpose of the daily Scrum is quite simple. You use 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to work on today? And if there are any impediments, any blockers that don't let you progress further. And this helps with escalation to the senior data scientist or to the lead data scientist as needed. Finally, at the end of the sprint, you have a sprint review where you play back all of the progress that you have done to the business stakeholders. So as I said, they need to be part of the journey. You can't go away and in a few months' time say, yeah, we have a model like that. So you have to make sure that every single 2-week sprint, you have that a playback session with the stakeholders, and you can understand what is delivered already and if they're aligned with the process so far. Finally, we do a sprint retrospective, and this is about making sure that what we're doing so far works, and if we need to take any specific actions, any specific learnings from the previous sprint, this can be incorporated into the next sprint, which is part of the backlog refinement session. In the backlog refinement, we just make sure that if there are any newly created needs, these are incorporated into the sprint planning, and of course make sure that we're progressing towards the right path. At the end of this phase, you are expected to have an MVP and every single code that will let you monitor the solution and its performance while being deployed. And another thing would be the change impact assessment in case you need the company to adapt this new solution and to make sure that they have the proper training to do that. After you have the MVP built, the next phase is the pilot phase. And if you recall at the business understanding phase, we had established already that the solution can indeed be tested. At this phase, we put theory into practice, and we evaluate the performance of the tool against the business KPIs that we had established and defined in the definition of done document. And this is the entire scope of the pilot phase. You're trying to prove the value through, let's say, an A/B testing, depending on your solution. And of course, during the process, we also capture any feedback. So if there needs to be a quick change into your solution, or if there needs to be an entire new functionality that needs to be in a future iteration, this is the part for the stakeholders to give the feedback and make sure that your product is as robust as possible. At the end of this phase, if everything goes well, the value of your MVP is proven. And this is great because we start going into the next phase, which is the release. So in the release, it's all about handovering that specific data product to the IT. All the different teams that have contributed towards the creation of the end product are being contacted and make sure that all the different steps and activities have been completed successfully, and then you can add that specific product to the list of the live systems within EasyJet. Also, there's a service wrapper that is all about, you can think actually of the service wrapper as the blueprint of the solution, right? If there are any knowledge articles, the documentation, all of these are going to be part of the service wrapper. And different teams are also contacted to make sure that we understand if something goes wrong into production, who's going to be the first line of defense or who's going to be the second level of support. Everything is defined in the service wrapper. And simply as that, your solution is packaged and then deployed into production. So I understand that probably given the time constraints, this was a lot of information, but if there are a few takeaways that I would like you to remember going through that door, is that always start from a business problem, not from an AI solution. And remember, the business problem is always what's going to bring you value, and this is what you're going to tackle first. And if you don't start with the business problem, there's no way you're going to kick off that solution design. Okay, so this is the first thing. And of course, if you start from the other way around, having, I don't know, any fancy machine learning algorithms, probably they're going to be used for something, but these are not going to solve the problem that you want, or the stakeholders that want. Secondly, do not build prototypes, build MVPs. And prototypes may be useful for, I don't know, for different industries, but in a commercial setting, MVP is what's going to bring you value. And the last step is test your solution live, because you need to remember that your product is only going to bring value to your business when it's live. So thank you so much for your attention, and happy to take any questions.